Good evening, everyone. Let's please open with a short prayer. Dear Heavenly Father, please help my story, help somebody else today. Amen. My name is Robert Marsh, and I'm a believer who struggles with alcohol and drugs. My sobriety date is April 16, 2014. I was born in North Fort Myers, November 16, 1983, at Lee Memorial Hospital. My parents loved me. I had a great childhood, fun, normal childhood. My mom divorced my biological father when I was 5 years old and married her neighbor a few years after that. My biological dad had a camper and lived in a driveway for a while. I later found out he had a drinking problem and was very mean to my mom, and that's why she divorced him. But since she remarried, I had a new dad now that loved me dearly, so he adopted us and gave us his last name. I think I was around 7 years old and was completely okay with it. My parents loved me and gave me everything that I needed. Played sports, was in Cub Scouts, Boy Scouts, a normal childhood. We went to church occasionally, mainly on Easter, or if we went to visit my mom's family in Sarasota. Didn't really have God or Jesus in my life. My mom did give us bracelets that said WWJD, what would Jesus do? Because I always got in a little bit of trouble. Suspended from school for throwing water balloons full of beer at the bus driver while driving the bus because my dad had beer on tap at the house and I thought it'd be funny to do. My parents drank occasionally. In my early teenage years, I had some friends that always came over. They just started high school, and they said my mom smoked weed and that we should smoke some. This was the year right before I started high school. So when my parents were not home, and me and my friends snuck in and took some of my mom's weed and smoked it. We didn't get caught. Nothing happened. Didn't get in any trouble. So when I started high school, my friends and I started drinking and smoking weed whenever we could. My grades at school have been on a slow decline since the 4th grade. My freshman year, a couple of friends of mine went to go visit my biological dad. He had warm cases of Milwaukee's Best in the corner. He was drinking it warm. He told my friends that his roommates wouldn't drink it warm. And when we left his house, I was so embarrassed. I knew he was still an alcoholic and only ever saw him a couple times a year, if that. And when I was 17, I was arrested for possession of alcohol. My mom let me and my friends smoke weed and drink at the house. She knew we were safe, but when I was arrested, she came to pick me up. I never went to jail, just a court date. A judge had me do a community service and write a 500-word essay, which I talked about how horrible my biological father was for him being an alcoholic and how he treated my mom, and that I didn't want to be that person and that I learned my lesson, which in all reality, the very next weekend I was back at it again. Later that year, my mom was in a head-on collision driving to work that morning and ended up dying at the age of 40 years old in a car crash. The lady who hit my mom had a heart attack while driving her vehicle. I was a lost mama's boy, all depressed and no direction in life. Just lost in my own selfish ways. By this time, I was drinking and using drugs whenever I had the chance. It made me feel accepted and the center of attention. I loved it. In my 20s, my family had an intervention on me. Said I either go to rehab or they were going to Baker Act me. I gladly went to rehab because I knew I had a problem. Went to detox, then a halfway house in Port Charlotte. I felt great. I was a couple weeks sober/dry. And then at the halfway house, a 50-year-old man wanted me to pee in a cup for a drug test. He was watching me very closely, and I couldn't pee at all. He said I had 5 more minutes to pee in this cup or he was going to kick me out. And I said, after 5 more minutes, I packed up my stuff and went home. I felt great. Family was excited I was back, so I stayed away from my friends because they were still drinking and doing drugs. My high school friend was getting married, and he wanted me to be in his wedding. After several weeks or months, I finally told him yes, I'd be of being in his wedding. And that day of his wedding, I had purchased an 18-pack of beer and a couple grams of Coke. And that was another 8 years of not looking back in complete insanity. Bounced around from friends and family who would let me stay with them for a short period of time. Always felt as a loner and always looking for a handout. Knocked up a girl and had a son. She was going to move to Ohio with her family, and I just let her take my son with her. Ended up getting a DUI in 2011, and this is where I started to understand my drinking and drugging had complete control over me. I wanted to stop, but I couldn't. I ended up meeting my ex-wife on probation for that DUI, and she was my drinking buddy that wouldn't let me drink and drive. So I was like, great, now I won't get another DUI. We just got taxis when we went out drinking. I was getting mean by now when I got drunk and using a lot of other drugs, pain pills, coke, alcohol. I was a complete garbage can for any type of drug, which my ex-wife only knew about the alcohol and weed addiction. We ended up having a daughter and naming her Grace. My drinking was getting on my ex-wife's nerves, so I cut down on my drinking and started doing more drugs so I could hide them. Thought it was a great idea. I was able to provide financially for my family for a little bit, and that brings me to my bottom. When the pills and heroin had me spending over $100 a day and the bills backed up, my landlord let me know that if I didn't pay him next Friday, he was going to kick me and my family out. I was completely out of options. I was going to end up homeless, dead, or in jail. I had my own intervention. I had my parents, my ex-wife, my sober brother all over for dinner. This was the first time of being honest with everyone. I told my boss as well that I had a really bad drug problem. They all knew something was going on with me lying and stealing and not being present whenever I was even around them. I thought I hid it so well. My brother recommended I start going to meetings with him. I said, sure, I didn't know how to live sober. I thought my life was over. I could only have fun or joy in my life if I was high or on something. So I went to my first meeting, which was Celebrate Recovery. I don't remember much from that night, but a gentleman asked if he could pray to relieve the bondage of alcohol and drugs from me. I said, sure. The next day, I smoked some weed to help with the withdrawals from the opiates. Went to another meeting that Wednesday. Was my first day completely sober. That same guy that prayed for me on Monday was there on Wednesday, and I asked for him to pray for me again, and he gladly did without hesitation. I also heard I needed a sponsor and that I should get one quickly. Another guy walked up to me and asked if I had a sponsor. I said no. He said, well, here's my number and call me tomorrow. I started calling that guy every day and spilling my guts to him. Said things will get better. Just stay sober and keep coming to meetings. He asked me what was I willing to do to get sober. I said I was willing to do anything and I was out of ideas. He said, okay, then you are ready. Time to do some work. Go to 90 meetings in 90 days. I said, that's impossible. He said, I did, and so can you. So I told my ex-wife, I told my boss that I needed to do this, and they both said, please do. I don't know why they wanted me gone, or just hopefully I would get sober. So I started going every night of the week, calling my sponsor daily, and meeting with him once a week. Started doing the steps of recovery. Step 1 was easy. I knew I was out of ideas. My sponsor offered me $20 to do some controlled drinking at the bar. I said, no, thank you. I don't want to do that anymore, and I was desperate for help. And followed all the suggestions. Somehow, during those first 90 days, I stayed sober. Met a lot of cool people, and started talking with them them regularly, seeing them all the time at meetings, from CR to AA to CA. Even went on vacation in that first 90 days to a small town in Georgia. I thought they weren't going to have any meetings in this small little town in Georgia. But for some reason I was wrong. And my sponsor said I still needed to go to meetings on vacation. I didn't even know there was meetings in this small town, so I had meetings every night of the week within 45 minutes from this small town in Georgia. One of those nights I was lost, trying to find a meeting. I was about to give up and finding the location when a police officer pulled up behind me. I waved him past for him to go on his way. He pulled up, seeing my Florida plate, knowing I was lost, asked me what I was looking for. I said the name of the church, and he said, great, follow me, right this way. So in other words, I had a police escort me to an AA meeting. Like, only God can orchestrate this stuff. And that was when I started noticing God work in my life also. I started to enjoy the fellowship and different meetings and people in recovery. I started to find joy and happiness without drugs and alcohol. That guy praying for me really helped. I talked to my grandma, I believe it was a couple years into my recovery, and I was telling her how God has been working in my life, and I was starting to see it. She started crying on the phone and told me that she never stopped praying for me, and that gave me incredible goosebumps. I was feeling and seeing God work in my life, and my sponsor having me kneel down to do the third step prayer with him and ask God to come into my life, and that he could have all of me, the good and the bad. Things really started to change. Then in the big book of Alcoholics Anonymous said, now it's time for vigorous action and start doing my 4th step. Went to the big book of AA and started doing it, and I was feeling good, resting on my laurels and procrastinating for at least 6 months on my 4th step. Because I read ahead and didn't want to have to tell this stuff to my sponsor. Full of fear and just hid from actually doing it. The one guy who prayed for me for the first few meetings said to me one day, if you don't do a 4th, you'll drink a 5th. That scared me though. So I started praying more and got the willingness to do the 4th step because I didn't want to drink or do drugs again. The 4th step was just a big old boogeyman that wasn't even there. Doing the 5th step with my sponsor that day was way more peaceful. My sponsor shared with me a few things from the very beginning that set me at ease. The stuff I wasn't going to share at all ended up coming out first. And then when we were done, he assured me that him and God both forgave me and that I should forgive myself. The next major part in my recovery is when I had to do my 9th step amends. This is where the promises of AA were coming true for me. Making amends to family and people I had harmed ensured I was on the right path. Some of the financial amends had an impact on me. When I was younger, I always stole a bunch of candy, cigarettes, beer, and soda from a gas station near my parents' house on Del Prado. I had so much fear to go in there and make the amends to the store. Months had gone by. I finally had enough courage, or was tired of my sponsor asking me how my amends were going. So I went in to ask to speak with the manager. I told her that I was in recovery and didn't want to drink or do drugs again. and that I needed to make amends for what I had done. She told me to hold on. She went into the back office, which seemed like for like 5 minutes. I really thought she was calling the police, and they were coming for me for something I did 10 years earlier. I'm thinking about just running out the door and never come back. The manager and another lady came out of the office, and it was the district manager. God's timing, okay? The district manager, and I told her the exact same thing that I told the manager. She asked me how much I have stolen, and I said I wasn't entirely sure. She said, well, how about you pay back $100 whenever I get money to put it in the envelope addressed to her and just give it to the clerk to have him put in the safe. I was blown away by what she suggested. I really thought I was going to jail. The rewards from doing this kind of stuff are unreal. Before I got sober, my brother and my biological father were both sober at the time. So after I got sober, I started talking and being more active with restoring these relationships. I was 2 years sober. My biological father was diagnosed with stage 4 throat cancer and passed away very quickly. At that same time, I had the opportunity to get custody of my son in Ohio. The one I didn't care about just said, go ahead and leave. My biological father helped fund and encourage me to get custody of him the correct way through the courts. After he passed, I was granted full custody of my 5-year-old son, who is now 12, through the courts of Ohio. I was about 3 years sober. Me and my ex-wife decided to get divorced. I thought my life was falling apart. I was depressed, not trusting God in any way. I had to move back in with my parents, and I was 3 years sober. Why is this all happening to me? I was feeling horrible, not wanting to drink or do drugs. I kept calling my sponsor and going to meetings. I finally gave everything to God. It was very difficult for me to do. I thought I had to have some control in my life. When I finally gave it all to God, my life continued to change. Ended up moving in with my sober brother and his wife. That helped me be part of the Celebrate Recovery off Coronado when it first opened about 8 years ago. Excuse me. Things were getting better when I started to trust God more and myself less. This is when I started to grow more towards God and gain His trust, and that His plan for me is better than I could ever imagined of. Somehow I've changed by doing this work. I have been able to see other people grow and change. My selfish, self-centered ways have changed to some degree. I am not perfect. I still have a lot of work to do. I still have moments in my life that I notice and see that I am becoming selfish and self-centered. And I just quit smoking about 4 months ago. And all that time, while I was smoking, I would go outside to smoke. And if I go outside to smoke, I am walking away from what's going on inside the house. The kids, my fiance, the stuff inside still continues to go, even though I go outside for 10 minutes at a time. So quitting smoking is also see where I was even selfish with just smoking. And it has given me tools to help change my selfish ways. Celebrate Recovery and the other fellowship I'm involved in has actually given me a life worth living. I am engaged to a woman who is also in recovery. She is amazing, and I know God has put us together. The past couple years, I have actually been able to be a good father, a son, a spouse, a brother, an employee, a useful member of society, which I believe I used to be worthless and useless. I don't know what God has in store for me, but I am sure whenever I get out of the way and let God work in my life, things are way better. When I use the 12 steps in my life and the principles in the 12 steps to be of service to others, for me, That means to be of service to my kids, my fiance, my employer, and all the people I'm involved with. It's easy to be that person in recovery meetings, but using this stuff in real day-to-day living is where I find the most rewarding. If I am consumed by my selfish ways, my days are not good. I have always been aware of my selfish ways. The hope for the newcomer is that if God can get me and keep me sober and happy, just imagine what he can do for you. All I have to do is let him. Thank you, everyone.